My presentation today is to think about how the testimonial, how personal narratives, in this case Caribbean narratives, can help in the advocacy work of women's cancers. So whose suffering matters less and why was the incessant classroom question of Professor June Jordan, the Black feminist poet and activist who died of breast cancer in 2002. These words of his Berkeley professor and mentor, whose suffering matters less and why, framed Dr. Sriram Shamasundar's February 16, 2016 TED Talk on the disparities in global health. Watching his teacher die from breast cancer as a first-year medical student, he witnessed firsthand the dire statistics about Black women and breast cancer detection and treatment. They are diagnosed later, don't have access to care as often, and even when diagnosed, don't receive recommended treatments. Dr. Shamasundar concedes that as medical professionals, quote, we struggle on behalf of what we know, who we identify with, and who we love, end quote. And then he asked the provocative question, if there were more narratives of Black women in the public sphere, would we have an easier time identifying with Black women? Would we be able to see ourselves in Black women? Would we push for a health system that ensures quality care for equal lives? I open with this medical doctor's testimonial because as an oncologist, in offering his former teacher's story as testimony, he identifies the important role of testimonies in women's cancer detection and care. So I thought what I might do on this occasion that brings together an international and hemispheric community of medical and healthcare practitioners to think about the question of women's cancers in the Americas is to offer the way that writers and critics of Caribbean descent have put forward narratives of Caribbean women and cancer in the literary public sphere as one effort in the larger project of advocacy work. Because we know that changing the outcomes around screening, detection, prevention, and treatment necessitate a change in cultural practices, all sectors of the society have to be engaged. In that vein, a few Caribbean writers have been doing the initial work of breaking the silence and giving voice to Caribbean women living with and dying from cancer, breast cancer specifically. So in the time that I have allotted, I want to offer a multi-generational view of both male and female writers, and I have chosen 5 texts. So 1 memoir, 3 novels, and 1 poem, and then in the other, towards the end of the presentation, I have another memoir as well. So published in, is it going? I thought I was just supposed to. Okay, so published in 1980, Audre Lorde's memoir, The Cancer Journals, is one of the earliest representations of Caribbean women's narratives around cancer. So born in New York City in 1934 with parents from Barbados and Carriacou, Lorde is first diagnosed with breast cancer at 46 years old. 6 months after her radical mastectomy, she begins journaling as an attempt to integrate the crisis of breast cancer into her life, and first publishes the Cancer Journals in 1980. 6 years after her mastectomy, she is diagnosed with liver cancer and dies in 1992 at 58 years old in St. Croix. Lorde is recognized as a pioneering figure in Black feminist criticism who created a space for LGBT issues to be spoken about in Black spaces. The second text is by Dominican-American writer Junot Diaz. His novel, The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, was published in 2007 and for which he wins the 2008 Pulitzer Prize for Literature. In his novel, Belly, the mother of our title character, Oscar, has breast cancer. The third text is a pair of novels, Anna in Between, published in 2009, and its sequel, Boundaries, published in 2011. These Anna novels by Trinidadian-American writer Elizabeth Nunez deals with 39-year-old Anna, an only child who returns to her Caribbean island home to spend an extended summer vacation with her aging parents, only to discover that her 80-year-old mother has breast cancer, a secret that she's kept both from her husband and her adult daughter. The fourth poem, Words, by Professor Edward Baugh of the University of the West Indies, the Mona campus in Jamaica. So in preparing for this talk, I asked Elizabeth Nunez, who is herself both a creative writer and literary critic, if she could think of any other texts that deal with cancer in Caribbean literature, to which she replied, quote, "It does strike me that Caribbean writers, women writers, seem loath to speak about women's health issues, perhaps for the same reason my mother hid her cancer, a combination of religion and superstition based on a fatalistic view of the inevitable progress of the disease. There's also a fear of the society's reaction." She prompts me to think about the veiled and elusive ways Caribbean writings deal with the cancer question by not naming it specifically, which replicates how the society itself deals with cancer. Buried in the creative fiction, then, a critic can mine these writings for suggestive representations. So, for example, Haitian-American writer Edwidge Danticat's 2013 novel, Clear of the Sea Light, has a pivotal female character who is seen by the community as eccentric because she remains unmarried and chooses a lover, but also because she suffers from irregular vaginal bleeding and also vomits blood. These symptoms ail her throughout the novel, but readers never know what exactly she's dealing with, nor does she seek treatment. While the condition remains unnamed, an informed reader, though one not medically trained, speaking about myself, might question whether, in fact, this is an instance of either cervical cancer or endometrial cancer dealt with in silence. In Danticat's first novel, Breath Eye's Memory, published in 1994, the mother has breast cancer and has a double mastectomy, but these issues recede in the background as the novel foregrounds rape, political trauma, immigration, and loss between mother and daughter. Yet I would argue that if we look for such prominent yet unspeakable or incomplete depictions, we would find many more representations. So the texts that I've selected for today overtly name and address cancer. Together, these texts traverse the gender and generational divide, as Junot Diaz is in his 50s, Elizabeth Nunez in her 70s, Edward Baugh is in his 80s and lives in the Caribbean region, in Jamaica specifically. What I'd like to do is give you a sense of the texture of the voice in all of these texts, offer some analysis, and then open for discussion, or in fact, we can just have our reception. So the first quote is from the opening paragraph of Audre Lorde's Cancer Journals. Oops. How do I go back? Okay. The first quote is from the opening paragraph of Audre Lorde's Cancer Journal, and it says, "Each woman responds to the crisis that breast cancer brings to her life out of a whole pattern, which is the design of who she is and how her life has been lived. The weave of her everyday existence is the training ground for how she handles crisis. I am a post-mastectomy woman who believes our feelings need voice in order to be recognized, respected, and of use. Survival is only part of the task. The other part is teaching." So in 1979, Lorde does not choose reconstructive surgery, though she makes it clear that she's not judging women who do. In the absence of role models, Lorde chooses to record the story of her diagnosis, surgery, and recovery to, one, acknowledge the active group of women who supported her throughout, and 2, to give voice to how she learned to love her altered body, as well as to empower women to make decisions about their health. Since silencing was debilitating, writing for Lorde was freeing. So the second quote is from Junot Diaz's Oscar Wilde. Oscar's mother, Belly, has breast cancer, to which the reader is introduced in chapter 2 of the novel as a transformative moment for his 13-year-old sister, Lola. Quote, "It never changes. It's never the changes we want that change everything. This is how it all starts, with your mother calling you into the bathroom. You will remember what you were doing at that precise moment for the rest of your life. She was standing in front of the medicine cabinet mirror, naked from the waist up, her bra slung over her waist like a torn sailor, the scar on her back as vast and inconsolable as the sea. Ven acá, she demanded. She's frowning at something on one of her breasts. She takes your right hand and guides you. Your mom is rough in all things, but this time she's gentle. Do you feel it? She asked in an all too familiar raspy voice. At first, all you feel is the heat of her body and the density of tissue like bread that has never stopped rising. She kneads your fingers into her. You're as close as you've ever been, and your breathing is what you hear. Do you feel that? She turns towards you. Coño, muchacho, stop looking at me and feel. So you close your eyes and your fingers are pushing down, and then suddenly, without warning, you do feel something. A knot just beneath her skin, tight and secretive as a plot. And at that moment, for reasons you will never quite understand, you are overcome by the feeling, the premonition, that something in your life is about to change. I feel it, you say, too loudly. Lo siento. And like that, everything changes. Before the winter is out, the doctors remove that breast you were needing along with the axillary lymph node. Because of the operation, she will have trouble lifting her arm over her head for the rest of her life. Her hair begins to fall out, and one day she pulls it all out herself and puts it inside a plastic bag. You change too, not right away, but it happens, and it's in the bathroom where it all begins, where you begin. So the remainder of the novel focuses on our title character, Oscar, and the trials of both him and his sister, Lola. When the mother does appear in the text, she shows up as the firm disciplinarian. But the text does not mention anything else about how she's living in the aftermath of breast cancer during the entire 10-year period of the children growing up. And as readers, we are so focused on Oscar's misadventures in masculinity that we actually forget about Belly's cancer and her bodily vulnerability. When our main character dies in the Dominican Republic, in the final chapters of the novel, Belly goes back to the DR to get her son's body to bury him in the US. When we learn that her cancer comes back a year after her son's death, this time it dug in and stayed, and she would live for another 10 months, but by then she had more or less given up, and they buried her next to her son. So even when the author is male, we see this discussion about detention being framed between mother and daughter. Even more poignant is that the only moment of tenderness between mother and daughter in the novel comes with this initial scene of feeling her mother's lump and recognizing her mother's bodily vulnerability. What does it mean that the teenage daughter recognizes this moment as equally transformative for her development as it is for her mother's? What does it mean that this event is the central moment of identity formation for a teenager, where she begins? What does it mean that Oscar's response is never represented in the novel? Does his absence position breast cancer as a woman's issue? And what does it mean that post-surgery Belly's cancer is no longer discussed? I turn now to a quote from Elizabeth Nunez's 2009 novel, Anna in Between, which resonates with Diaz's depiction. The point of this novel and her subsequent memoir, Not for Everyday Use, is to shed light on the cultural mores that limit frank discussions about women's bodily health, including cancer. And so here is the quote from this text. "I want to show you something. Unhook me," her mother says. Anna remains where she is, a safe distance away from her mother. She does not move. In their household, they do not expose their bodies, not to each other. Husbands and wives may have to bare their naked bodies to each other, but not mothers and daughters. "Here, I'll help you." Her mother removes her bra. She turns around. "This is what I want you to see." Nothing has prepared Anna for what her mother wants to show her. Nothing has prepared her for the lump pushing beneath the skin on her mother's left breast, or the thin trail of partially dried blood beneath it. Anna gasps. Instinctively, with no time to think, she throws her arm around her mother's neck and buries her head in the well of her shoulders. "How long?" she asks. "How long have you had this?" Her mother, calm now, lifts her hand. Underneath her arm is another large lump, her lymph nodes swollen, pushing against her skin. "Oh, Mummy," Anna clutches her neck and squeezes her skin to stop her head from shaking. "I haven't told your father. I've prayed every night for it to go away. Every morning at 2 o'clock I come here. I pray, I say the rosary. It's on my mind all the time. In the day I am busy and I forget sometimes, but at night I am alone. You need a doctor," Anna says. Her mother shakes her head. "I'll take you to the doctor." And her mother says, "A doctor cannot help me." So the novel explores the family's stoicism. Clearly they love each other, but are socialized to not be overtly expressive in their emotions. When the instinctive moment of tenderness is shown upon seeing her mother's breast, the reaction is literally out of character, so much so that the author has to make note of it. Instinctively, with no time to think, she throws her arm around her mother's neck. Of course, they quickly compose themselves and go into problem-solving mode. For the mother, it's prayer. For the daughter, it's medical science. In this depiction, religion is seen as primitive, and the daughter from abroad comes in with the rational science. Perhaps the lesson to be learned here is that the two, faith and science, do not have to be mutually exclusive. The novel presses us to consider the deep-seated cultural mores that have to be acknowledged, accommodated, and sometimes rejected in order to make meaningful intervention. The final quote is a poem from Eddie Baugh entitled Words. Here, an adult son in Jamaica takes his mother to the doctor where he has the results. He has the results of the oncology report. Yet he cannot find the words to share this painful news with his mother. "My mother loved words, not necessarily in sentences or speeches, just words. She read the dictionary like a bedside book. She taught me words while I watched her at the crossword puzzle, her relief from drudgery, and now this delectable, mouth-filling word. I cannot teach her. Metastasis, multiple metastases. The word glows a guilty secret through the large brown envelope lying on the back seat with x-rays and the radiologist's report. She sits rigid with pain, too proud to ask, is there any word of relief? In the silence between us, you can hear the metastasis multiply. If art imitates life, this summary overview captures a cultural sensibility in which cancer is still shrouded in shame and secret in our greater Caribbean societies. We have focused on migration, intimate violence, depression, but we have not highlighted cancer enough. At the turn of the 21st century, these writers tell us that for our Caribbean girls, women and girls, the relation to their bodies is still framed in silence and shame. In fact, in Caribbean literature, it shows us that we do not like talking about the body in general. Instead, Caribbean girls inherit understandings of bodily shame and respectable comportment, along with warnings not to be promiscuous. What do we pass along as intergenerational knowledge, and how is it done? How do we make these moments, these bodily rites of passage, joyous, spaces of celebration and meaningful education? Or how would positive body talk prepare us to confront such illnesses, or in Audre Lorde's words, provide us with the training ground to handle crisis? So personal narratives can and do play an important role in advocacy of women's cancers. Testimonials provide an intimate lens into interior lives of cancer patients and are written with an audience of women going through similar situations in mind. So when the researcher or someone who works as a professional and in a professional capacity on women's health decides to position herself as an autoethnographic subject by writing her testimonial, as Felicia Nall does in Beauty Without the Breast, she's doing powerful advocacy work, inserting her autoethnographic eye to take us through the journey of how health systems work and the physical and emotional stakes on the patient and her family. She gives readers a rare glimpse into both sides of the equation. Her ethnographic research eye contributes to existing knowledge about equity and inequities in healthcare systems, and she turns the first world eye and institutional privilege to do advocacy work for underserved communities throughout the Americas. And because it is a book, it transcends borders and has an afterlife of its own. It is the book I give to my friend, a Black female medical sociologist, as she recovered from breast cancer surgery in Memorial Sloan Kettering this summer. Advocacy work for women's cancer brings us together to work together today in our different professional capacities and across our intersectional differences. More narratives, more testimonials of and by diverse women in the global public sphere allows us to better identify with women and push for health systems that ensure equal care for equal lives. Thank you.